26. I'm 83. My Amish husband wouldn't let the doctor tell me the truth. Don't tell her yet. She'll only worry. I hear Amos say it through the thin green curtain, while the paper gown scratches my knees, and the metal table leaks cold into my bones. The wall clock ticks too loud. Down the hall, a cartwheel squeals every third turn. The doctor doesn't answer. That silence feels wrong. I stare at the brown stain on Amos's left cuff, a thumbprint of harness oil he missed that morning, and I know he's pulling at the seam beneath it. He does that when he's scared. He thinks I can't see through the curtain, but his shadow keeps crossing my shoes. Then the doctor says one word: advanced. My tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth. Advanced what? How long has he known? Why did the nurse squeeze my hand after checking my pulse? And why did Amos tell our daughter Ruth to wait outside? I remember the room was warm. No, wait. It was cold. My face was hot. That's the part I mix up. The curtain opens 3 inches. Amos looks at me, but the doctor looks down. There's a folded paper in his hand with my name typed wrong. Sarah, no H. My whole life is inside that paper, and both men are holding it away from me. I'm 83 years old when I learn my body has been keeping a secret from me. Quick pause. My name is Sarah, and this is Rebecca Amish Homie. If these stories make you feel less alone, subscribe. It's free, and it keeps them being told. Tell me in the comments, who decides what truth you're strong enough to hear? And a super chat or membership tells me these voices are worth hearing. That keeps this going. Now, back to what happened. The doctor stepped through the curtain with a stool in one hand, its wheels knocking twice against the baseboard, and Amos came in behind him without meeting my eyes. In our Ortnum, the rules that shaped our days, a husband carried the weight of the home, and a wife was taught to trust that weight, even when it pressed on her chest. Nobody ever sat me down and said, "Sarah, your body belongs her husband's judgment." They didn't have to. I learned it when Mama lowered her voice around women's sickness, when Bishop Yoder answered questions meant for his wife, and when the clinic nurse handed papers to men who could barely read them. That's the thing nobody tells you. A rule doesn't need words when everybody knows where to look. The doctor rubbed the corner of my chart with his thumb, bending it soft, while Amos crushed his hat between both hands. I had been bleeding for 11 months. Amos had known there might be a growth for 6. It lived in little things first. A woman would limp through Sunday singing, and nobody asked why. A girl would faint while snapping beans, and her mother would say she'd stood too near the stove, though the stove was cold. When I was 16, I asked why Aunt Lena never came to wash day anymore, and Mama dropped a clothespin into the blue enamel pail so hard it chipped the rim. Her husband sees to it, she said. That was all. I almost asked what it was, but Mama's mouth went flat, and I watched my question die between us like a moth near a lamp. But you learn. You learn which pain can be named and which pain must be folded small and tucked under the linens. By the time Dr. Keller sat before me, my hands were stacked the way Grandma taught me for prayer. I was ready to obey before I knew what I was being asked to bear. Amos and I had been married 61 years, though that morning I still thought of him as the boy who carried my basket home from the Miller farm, with cracked eggs beneath a towel. Ruth was our oldest, born in the back room during a March sleet storm, and Esther was my younger sister, the one who knew every herb by smell, but couldn't say womb without looking down. The first warning came the previous August. Dr. Keller pressed 2 fingers below my ribs, then asked Amos to step outside. Amos didn't. The doctor looked at him, then at me, and said there were 3 tests he wanted done. Blood, a picture from inside, and a small piece taken for checking. I counted them because 3 felt manageable. Amos asked whether they were truly needed. Dr. Keller said they were. Then Amos asked whether we could pray first. We went home with the papers folded inside his coat pocket. He wasn't a hard man. I need you to understand that. Amos warmed my boots beside the stove each winter morning and left the less burnt heel of bread for me, though he liked it best. We met at a barn raising when I was 19 and he was 23. No, 24. I get that wrong, because his birthday came 2 days before. He laughed when a white chicken landed on Bishop Yoder's buggy and refused to move, and I loved the way he hid it behind his hand. I think it was love, or the nearest thing two shy people could build with almost no words. That trust became our whole house. So when Amos said the tests might lead to shame, debt, and questions from English doctors who didn't understand us, I believed he was guarding me. His thumb worried the papers until blue ink stained his skin. He was frightened, too. That's the thing nobody tells you. Fear can look exactly like care when you've never seen another shape for it. For months, I boiled raspberry leaf and slept with a towel beneath me, the one with 2 red stripes from our wedding set. Esther came every other Thursday with comfrey salve in a baby food jar, though neither of us knew where I was meant to rub it. Ruth asked why I looked gray around the mouth. I said the winter had been long, though it was October, and the maple by the pump held half its leaves. The women at quilting spoke without saying much. "You're working too hard. Take more broth." A wife's body changes. Miriam touched my wrist and kept her fingers there a second too long. I wanted to ask what she knew, but Bishop Yoder's wife entered carrying black thread, and the room went quiet except for 12 needles pulling through cotton. By January, I couldn't climb the cellar steps without stopping at the 6th one. By February, Amos called Dr. Keller because I fell beside the flour bin and couldn't stand until the kettle screamed dry. The examination room had a lamp with a yellow shade that leaned left, as if somebody had bumped it years ago and never fixed it. The table paper crackled whenever I breathed. Outside, a snowplow scraped the road in metal groans, and each pass made the cabinet doors tremble. I wore my blue dress with the mended cuff and wool stockings thin at both heels. Amos sat near the sink, turning his hat in his hands. He looked smaller without it. The room smelled of rubbing alcohol, wet wool, and peppermint candy kept for children. One silver wrapper lay beneath the radiator. I stared at it because it was easier than looking at the chart. Dr. Keller washed his hands too long. The water hissed, the towel tore, and still nobody told me what advanced meant. "What is it?" I asked. He glanced at Amos first. That glance lasted less than a breath, but it landed like a locked door. Amos pulled the seam of his sleeve. Once, twice. "Maybe we should speak at home," he said. "No," I told him, though the word came out thin. Dr. Keller rolled closer, his trouser cuff dark with melted snow. "Sarah, the tests show a cancer in your womb." The room didn't move, but my body did. My heels pressed against the table leg. My fingers opened and closed against the gown. Down the hall, a woman laughed once, and a telephone rang beneath it. I looked at Amos. He was crying without sound, tears caught in his gray beard. "What tests?" I asked. Dr. Keller's mouth tightened. Amos whispered, "The ones from before." His hand moved toward mine. I pulled back, maybe an inch, but he saw it, and his whole face folded. "I thought prayer might change it," he said. I wanted to strike him and hold him at once. Instead, I watched a bead of water hang from the tap, fat and bright, refusing to fall. Dr. Keller spoke carefully, each word placed down like a jar on a shelf. After the first visit, Amos had returned alone. He brought the papers and asked whether there was a less exposing way to know. Dr. Keller explained the risk and sent him home with another appointment date. Amos canceled it. Twice. The third time, Ruth drove me because I couldn't stop shaking, and the doctor ordered the tests without waiting for Amos's answer. "You knew since August?" I asked. Amos said, "I knew there was worry." That wasn't the same as knowing, not to him. Maybe it wasn't. Dr. Keller said the sickness had spread beyond where it began. There were treatments, but fewer choices now. I heard him, yet my mind kept returning to the folded towel under my side of the bed and the rusty stain I scrubbed each morning with lye soap. Amos asked about travel, cost, and whether the church would allow certain care. He didn't ask how much pain I'd been in. I don't say that to make him cruel. He simply didn't know pain itself counted as a fact. Neither did I. When we left, I moved slowly, because the floor seemed tilted toward the door. The nurse gave me a paper cup of water, and my teeth clicked against the rim. Outside, Amos opened the buggy blanket as he always did. One corner was stiff with frozen mud. I sat beside him, but not close enough for our shoulders to touch. Halfway home, he said, "I was trying to keep fear from you." I said nothing, because fear was all I had left. The horse's breath rose white between the shafts, and every iron shoe struck the road with a dull beat. At Miller's Field, Amos reached over as if to tuck the blanket around my knee. His hand stopped above it, then fell back into his lap. I looked at the bare apple trees and understood home would look exactly the same when we arrived. That was almost the worst part. The plain fact is this: the 6 months mattered. Dr. Keller told us that finding it sooner could have meant more choices and less suffering. He'd said nearly the same thing to Amos in August, in the office beside the X-ray room, while I waited near a fake fern with dust on every leaf. Amos believed a husband should carry hard news until he knew how to place it before his wife. Dr. Keller believed he needed to respect our ways, though he looked sick when he admitted that. And I'd been taught that asking to hear my own results was mistrust. Nobody raised a hand, nobody shouted. Nobody had to. I went home with a sickness that had been growing while 3 decent people stood inside 3 different rules and called their silence kindness. That's the thing nobody tells you. Harm can enter a room with its hat in its hands and speak gently. Amos wasn't trying to hurt me. That's what makes it worse. He was doing what his father had done before him. I didn't know a doctor could ask my husband to leave. I didn't know I could say, "Tell me first." I didn't know there were papers saying who could hear my news, or that my name, not Amos's, belonged at the top. Those were outside words then, as strange as the machines humming behind the clinic wall. Amos had watched his father carry every hard choice when his mother grew ill, and Bishop Yoder praised that as a husband's duty: bear the burden, guard the wife, keep the home from fear. Dr. Keller had seen Amish families for 20 years and thought going through Amos was respect. The silence was older than every person in that room. Later, much later, a woman at the hospital would draw 2 circles on a yellow pad and say, "Your information belongs to you." 7 plain words. They would have changed the whole road, but that afternoon all I knew was that my body had been speaking for months, and everyone had heard it before me. For a while, I measured my days by what I could hide. I learned to fold a towel twice and place it beneath my dress before breakfast. I would stand at the sink when the pain came, because the edge was the right height to grip without anyone noticing. By the time the lilacs opened, I could smile through supper while counting each breath in groups of 4. Amos began doing the washing on Mondays, badly, with too much soap, and I let him, because gratitude was easier than speaking. At night, I pictured a white room with no doors and put myself inside it until my body felt far away. I counted the knots in the pine ceiling above our bed, 31, from the stovepipe to the wall, and started over whenever Amos shifted. That was my little trick. The mind is clever when it has nowhere else to go. I thought I was the only wife who disappeared like that. Turns out that was the community's best-kept bargain. We called endurance a virtue, then acted surprised when women vanished inside it. Miriam came one Tuesday with a basket of brown eggs, 3 cracked along the same side, and stayed while I shelled peas at the table. Her left hand shook whenever she reached into the bowl. "Did he tell you?" she asked. I knew she meant Amos, but I pretended not to. "Tell me what?" She looked toward the pantry door, where the latch never caught unless you lifted it. "Nothing," she said. Then, after a long pause, "Mine did too." 4 words. That was all. At the next quilting, Lena sat across from me, pulling green thread through a star block, and said her doctor had spoken to Eli first. He thought it kinder. Her needle stopped in the cloth. I almost said, it wasn't kindness. I could feel the words behind my teeth. But Bishop Yoder's wife passed the coffee, and Lena smiled too quickly, and I swallowed them with a bitter sip that tasted faintly of scorched grounds. Lena's story came out in pieces over the next year. She had found a lump beneath her arm while bathing from a tin basin, but Eli told her it was likely a pulled muscle from lifting feed sacks. He waited until after harvest to take her in because the farm couldn't spare him. By then, the doctor spoke of surgery and distance and time. Lena wanted to ask questions, but Eli answered each one before she opened her mouth. "We'll pray on it," he said. "We'll decide at home." She died the following spring, during mud season, when wagon wheels sank to their hubs on the North Road, and then give me a second. Lena had sewn my youngest girl's first bonnet, with 6 tiny pleats no wider than barley grains. At her funeral, the bishop spoke about patience. I remember, it wasn't patience, it was submission. I always soften that word in my mind. 4 months later, Miriam asked the clinic to speak with her alone. Her husband heard about it before supper. By Sunday, 3 women had told her she was bringing worldly ideas into her marriage. I kept living. That sounds small, but it wasn't. I learned which chair hurt least, which soup stayed down, and how to rest my head against the buggy wall without knocking my bonnet pins loose. I would wake before Amos and watch the square of dawn move across the quilt, pale as skim milk. He cared for me with the only tools he had. He warmed broth, rubbed my feet through wool stockings, and once sat up all night because I couldn't stop trembling. I loved him then. I resented him then. Both were true, and neither canceled the other. When he apologized, he said, "I should have known." I wanted to tell him knowing had never been offered to either of us. Instead, I touched the blue vein on the back of his hand and said, "You should have asked me." He nodded once. That was the first honest thing between us in months. The sentence came from a woman named Claire, in a hospital room, with blinds the color of old teeth. She wasn't Amish. She wore purple shoes with rubber soles and had a pen clipped upside down in her pocket. I was waiting for another scan when she pulled a yellow pad onto her knee and drew 2 circles. One circle was labeled body, the other was labeled choice. She placed my name inside both. "Your information belongs to you," she said. 7 words. My chest went tight so fast I thought the sickness had moved again. I pressed both palms against the blanket, feeling the rough weave bite my skin. The room blurred at the edges, and the vent above the door blew one cold thread of air across my wet cheek. Claire didn't touch me. She simply turned the yellow pad around so the circles faced me, then waited. Claire asked whether I needed water. I shook my head because I knew if I opened my mouth, something older than speech would come out. I wasn't angry. Not then. I was sad in a way that made my bones feel hollow. I grieved for the girl who thought obedience meant safety, for the young wife who mistook silence for peace, and for the old woman on the metal table waiting for 2 men to decide when truth could enter her own ears. Amos had been trapped too. His circle had never held his name either. It held duty, fear, church, father, husband, provider, every word except choice. That's the thing nobody tells you. A cage can be handed down with such care that the person passing it believes it's shelter, and I carried that. I carried it through treatment, through nights when Amos slept upright in a vinyl chair, Through the morning, he cried into my scarf because he thought I was asleep. Later, I tried to explain it to a woman at the pharmacy. She was kind, with bright red glasses and a tiny silver cross at her throat. "Why didn't you just demand the results?" she asked. Just. That word sat between us like a stone. I wanted to explain the look on Mama's face, the chipped enamel pale, Lena's stopped needle, Miriam's Sunday shame. The whole long road that teaches a girl her no is pride, and her question is danger. But the line behind me was growing, and a child kept squeaking the wheel of a toy truck. So I said, "I didn't know I could." She nodded, though I could tell she didn't understand. I walked outside carrying a white paper bag and stood beside a cart corral while wind lifted my skirt hem. I belonged nowhere for that minute. Home knew why I was silent. The outside world knew only that I had been. And still, there are things I miss. I miss horses breathing at dawn, that soft cloud rising over the fence while frost silvered every rail. Their harness chains made a low, bright sound, and I could tell which mare was coming before I saw her. I miss bread from the wood stove, the crust split down the middle, butter sinking into it before the knife left the slice. The first loaf always leaned to one side because our oven floor was crooked, and Mama called it the hungry loaf. I miss my grandmother's hands during prayer, broad and red at the knuckles, resting so still on her black apron that even the lamp flame seemed noisy. Afterward, those same hands could peel an apple in one long red ribbon. Those things were real. They weren't tricks. They fed me, shaped me, and gave me a way to notice small beauty. I am homesick for a place that hurt me. I don't know a cleaner way to say it. The harm was silence dressed as love. 5 words, and I wish they weren't enough. Beauty and harm can live in the same house. I know because I swept their floors for 61 years. I don't spit on where I came from. I still mend clothes instead of throwing them away. I still hum the old German hymn when rain starts on the roof, though I won't sing the verse about yielding. What I'm building now is smaller than a rebellion and larger than one too. I ask for the chart. I ask the second question. I tell my granddaughters the plain names for their bodies and wait while they answer. And sometimes, when an Amish buggy passes the clinic window, I pray for the woman inside it with more tenderness than anger. If you grew up somewhere your own body was kept from you like something dangerous, I see you. You may have learned to call fear modesty, silence respect, and pain a test you were meant to pass without making noise. You survived something. Surviving is enough. You're not broken because it took years to find the words. You're not foolish because you trusted the people who raised you. Trust is what children are built to give. The shame belongs nowhere near the child who gave it. The body remembers rules long after the mind begins to question them, and unlearning can feel like betrayal before it feels like freedom. Maybe you're still inside, listening with the sound low. Maybe you left years ago and still fold yourself small when someone asks what you want. Maybe you're thinking about leaving, and your stomach turns each time you picture the road. Maybe you're married, and only now seeing how often your answer was chosen for you. Maybe you recognized yourself a few minutes ago and haven't moved since. Wherever you are in this, I see you, and you are not alone. Leave me a comment. Tell me what you felt listening to this, or the moment that made your body go still. There is so much more I haven't said yet. I'm just getting started. There are stories I haven't been brave enough to tell, but I'm getting closer. Stay with Rebecca Amish, homie, if you believe quiet lives deserve honest words. And to the members and Super Chat family, you're the reason the next story gets told. If you want to be part of that, the door is always open. Amos died 2 winters after my last treatment, with his hand in mine and my name on every paper. Before he went, he said, "I should have let you know yourself." I told him, "You should have let me choose." He nodded. No excuses, just grief. I don't know whether forgiveness is one moment or 1,000 small ones. Maybe it's both. But I know this now, and I want you to know it too. Your truth belongs in your own hands.